We begin here in Nigeria, where President Muhammadu Buhari has signed the COVID-19 Regulations 2020 to declare COVID-19 as a dangerous infectious disease. In a statement by his media office, Buhari was said to have signed the regulations, in quotes, in exercise of the powers conferred on him by Sections 2, 3, 4, and of the Quarantine Act, enabled in 2004, and other powers enabling him in that behalf. Femi Adesina, his spokesman, said that the regulations, effective March 30th, 2020, in quotes, also gave legal backing to the various measures outlined in the President's national broadcast on March 29th of this year, such as restriction and cessation of movement in Lagos, FCT, the capital, and Ogun states, and others towards containing the spread of the pandemic in the country. Now, in the statements also, it was stated that in addition to the measures aimed at enabling Nigerians to perform online transactions and also use automatic teller machines, ATMs, during these restrictions, the regulations grant exemption to the financial system and the money markets too. Doctor, I'm just going to come straight over to you before I share my viewpoints on this and ask you for your take.
Well, I mean, yesterday we saw the president of Nigeria first on Sunday addressing Nigerians. I guess in response to the concern of many Nigerians that the president seems to be, to quote Professor Olusegun, seems in the face of COVID-19 to have, gone on a prolonged siesta.
Yeah.
Or, again to quote Professor Olusegun, that he had gone AWOL. And I think it was good that, public opinion was respected, and the president came out of, if you like, hiding, in quotes, and decided to take personal charge of the war against coronavirus in Nigeria. So on Sunday, he addressed the country. Immediately after his address and the things he said about the lockdown of Lagos, Ogun states, and the Federal Capital Territory, there was a protest by some, lawyers that, look, the president had done something that was illegal. And when we discussed this yesterday morning, I pointed out that, look, the president, is in a position to address the gray areas indicated in his speech, the omissions observed in his speech. And I think what he did now yesterday as follow-up action was to sign this coronavirus regulations, COVID-19 regulations 2020. And I think that he has the powers. And I guess many of the lawyers that have protested will see no reason anymore to further protest. What is the argument of the lawyers? Femi Falana, SAN, for example, Ebunlu Adeburuwa, SAN, for example, is that, look, you cannot do something, even if it is right, without recourse to the rule of law. And Professor Olusegun was saying in a statement he issued yesterday that we cannot breach the Constitution because we have an emergency. We must always respect the rule of law. And that's the position in, a major case, Okafo versus the governor of Lagos State. What, the president has now done is to invoke his powers under the Quarantine Act. The Quarantine Act is 94 years old, but it was, remodeled, adapted in, I think, 2004. And the president is relying on his powers under Sections 2, 3, 4 of the Quarantine Act. The Quarantine Act, by the way, prescribes penalties. I think it's 200 naira. I don't know. I don't remember, but it's a very small penalty for people who breach the rule. Now, the president is further empowered under the Public Order Act, 1979, 1981, to, in the interest of public order, take the kind of step that he has taken. And he has powers under Section 315 of the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria to bring any law that may have been enacted before the coming into being of the current Constitution in line with the existing legal order. He also has powers under Section 305 of the Constitution to declare an emergency in the country. The only caveat under Section 305 is that the federal government will publish an official gazette, and that official gazette has to be approved by the National Assembly. But the situation in which we have found ourselves, the National Assembly has gone on vacation. The House of Representatives passed COVID-19 stimulus bill, but the Senate, after one senator from Nasarawa coughed recklessly in the Senate, decided to adjourn, sine die. And then, of course, under Section 45, again, of the 1999 Constitution, I mean, it is expressly stated there are exemptions to the right of assembly or the right of movement under Section 40 or the right of assembly under Section 41. And that the president can take steps to protect people in the interest of public safety, public order, public health, and public morality.
Exactly.
So without any prejudice whatsoever to the fundamental rights of persons. And what the president has done technically is to protect the fundamental rights of other Nigerians, because nobody under Section 35, subsection 1E, is allowed to spread disease. In Ezeugo versus state, the point had been well established that you do not have right to endanger the lives of others. If you endanger the lives of others, you will be guilty of attempted murder.
Yeah.
And that is defined in the Ezeugo case. But what remains, it seems to me, is how do we enforce this? How do we penalize people? I think that the various security agencies who are now on the road must act with common sense and discretion and follow their standard operating procedures. They must know that we are in very difficult times, and although there may be COVID-19 regulations and restriction, they must use common sense, which is something that is very scarce in Nigeria.
Doctor, I completely agree with you, especially on that last point. And I guess that's also something that we'll dissect with our guest very shortly when he comes on the show to discuss exactly how the security agencies are going to respond to this new order that's been put in place. Very important. And to go back to your first point as well, before we move on with our next headline for the day as well, I also just want to say that, yes, it's good that the president finally did listen and he finally did come out and give that speech that we had all been waiting for. But it's also medicine after death. So there's also that angle to it as well that I believe a lot of people feel right now. And I feel like that kind of watered down his speech, which it shouldn't have, and it's such a shame. But to speak of our next headline, here today in Nigeria, we have recorded 20 new cases of COVID-19, bringing our total number of confirmed cases in the country to 131. Now, announcing this last night, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, said 13 of the cases were from Lagos, 4 from the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, and 2 from Kaduna, while 1 is from Oyo State. Meanwhile, the Lagos state government has confirmed that it has also discharged 5 COVID-19 patients from the Infectious Disease Center in Yaba. This brings to 8 the total number of discharged patients from the center since the first reported case of the disease in Nigeria on February 27th. And, Doctor, it's certainly great news that we're at a point where 5 more COVID-19 patients have been discharged. I think in a time of such negative and depressing news, it's good for us to know that, yes, there are people who are recovering, one of them being my friend as well that we spoke about, who will come on the morning show to share her story with us.
Yeah, I think it's a very encouraging development. You know that we've had...
Welcome back. You're still watching the morning show here on Arise News. Apologies for the slightly brief cutoff. Joining us now is our business correspondent, Rotus Odiri, for the latest headlines of today. Morning, Rotus. How are you?
Morning, Leila. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Obasi. So, yeah, really quickly, the Vice President Osibanjo is in the news. The President has appointed him as the chair of an Economic Sustainability Committee. And this was announced yesterday by Boss Mustafa, who is the secretary to the government of the Federation, the SGF. So they had their maiden announcement or announcement for the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. And Boss Mustafa yesterday made that announcement that Vice President Osibanjo was going to chair this committee. So the Committee for Economic Sustainability, which is going to be chaired by the Vice President, is set up to implement strategies to alleviate suffering of Nigerians during the lockdown. So some in the business committee are, questioning why this is put together. But I think I can understand why it's been set up. Although we've already on this show in the past commented on the central bank already setting up cushions, if you will, and stimulus, which is supposed to alleviate households and businesses that are already going to be, suffering from the fallout of COVID-19. Also, in addition to that, the number of circulars that were released yesterday from the Ministry of Finance and from the central bank is also a headline on today's This Day, which I believe you'll be going over when you review newspapers, that essentially there will be, quote, very skeletal services, which are financial services, which are going to be carried out during the lockdown period, where, key critical workers in the financial sector are going to be providing some services, and the central bank listed them. Also, the central bank said that there will be no checks being processed. There are not going to be any checks that are going to be processed during this lockdown period. So it's only going to be electronic transactions. And then, and if you think about it, Nigerians, not as many Nigerians are writing checks today as they used to write before. They're gravitating more towards electronic transactions. So it makes sense that the central bank would narrow down and say, we're only going to focus on checks. And then in another circular, they listed a number of financial operatives, such as the central bank and the deposit monetary banks, which will be operating during the lockdown. So that's just a quick update on what's going on.
A number of comments. I think it is very good that we now have Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo in the picture.
Yeah.
Many Nigerians have been concerned that the president did not involve the vice president in the process, given his talents, given the fact that even if the president was not available, he being his deputy would have been able to fill whatever gap existed originally. Yeah. And previously, Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo had proven himself to be a very loyal and dependable deputy. But now that he's part of it, the point about economic sustainability is very important. And the focus about seeing how Nigerians can survive the lockdown is also important. I hope that, that team, now being led by the vice president, will take notice of a particular subject, which is that many Nigerians are saying that there must be palliatives. They want Nigeria to follow the footsteps of the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and some other countries that have provided some kind of relief package for the ordinary man, particularly the self-employed.
Yes.
Because, as at yesterday evening, the major concern among Nigerians was, how are we going to survive? Lockdown, yes. We want to live. We want to respect values and government. But how are we going to survive? Who is going to help us? The Lagos State government is already having in place a food bank. The Ogun State government had asked the federal government to allow the state to begin to observe the lockdown from Friday evening, to allow the state to create some, and provide some palliatives for the people. So I think all of this is very important. As for the financial services, we discussed that yesterday morning. But the question to ask is, why do you say check instruments, will no longer be honored from the end of today? When, on the other hand, we're being told that skeletal services will be provided by the banks. And I think it's a good development. It means that government listened to reactions about the grey areas and the omissions in the president's speech.
Absolutely. Certainly government did listen, and it is good to see the vice president in the picture now. Rotas, thank you so much for the latest headlines in business today. We'll go on a very quick break, and when we're back, our sports analyst, Aaron Akerejala, will be here with the latest headlines in sports. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now is Aaron Akerejala, our sports analyst for the latest in sports today. Good morning, Aaron. How are you?
Good morning, Leila.
Good morning, Aaron.
Yes, good morning, Doctor.
Are you back?
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Leila, you guys stepped aside for a while.
Yes, we've both been away.
Yes, it's good to be back
you look
today.
very fresh.
It's expected.
Very well
For you to write a poem. So I'm the one
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And as usual, the lockdown, not just in Nigeria, also in the UK, is actually hitting heavily hard. And let's start it off from the Premier League. As a matter of fact, the Premier League right now on the cups, because as it stands right now, there are reports that the lockdown in the UK might stretch up to October, and that would actually put a dent into what the Premier League do have in hand right now. They know that they've collected monies from the broadcast sponsors. The broadcast sponsors' money every season, ironclad, is £3 billion. And as a matter of fact, if the Premier League does not finish, That will mean that the Premier League will have to return 750 million of those 3 billion. Right now, the Premier League are actually faced with a very hard task of looking for a way to finish the season before the 31st of July, when that particular contract actually elapsed. What they can do, what they should do right now, is now the big question. They've been thinking of probably playing in empty stadiums, but as a matter of fact, football is a spectator's event. Having fans in the stadium is part of the whole comedy. So not having fans there is also a downer, but at the moment, they are looking at it, worst case scenario, they might have to play without fans in the stadium so as to keep and still pocket that £750 million, at least for this season, before thinking about next season.
But their players can't social distance, can they?
Yeah, but I mean, is money more important? Is profit more important than human lives?
That's not a big question.
The famous phrase about life being more important than football. And I think that at this point, that should be what is more important. Even the Tokyo Olympics, was not going to be postponed. At the end of the day, I think we're hearing now that the Tokyo Olympics have been moved till July 2021.
Yes, that's about to reason.
So the Premier League, the other time we discussed this subject, I told you that, look, the league can close, as far as I'm concerned, and Liverpool can take the title, because these are perilous times, these are unusual times, and unusual times perhaps require unusual solutions.
They are looking at legal ramifications of all this. And more important, not just the legal ramifications, also they are also looking at the fact that it's a profit-oriented business. No, they've always boasted about the profitability of the English Premier League. Just imagine the fact that sponsorship.
If the sponsors, advertisers go to court, the Premier League can pledge force majeure.
Exactly.
What has happened is it's beyond everyone's control.
No, unfortunately, the contract, people might pledge force majeure, but the contract is ironclad, watertight, that says without any reason, if the season does not finish on or before the 31st of July, you would have to refund monies. It is already
basically
stated.
Giving no room for force majeure.
No room whatsoever. So that is where they find themselves at a very, very crucial
that can be argued in court. And the court can determine whatever equitable reliefs may be available.
Unusual
to persons who may have been adversely affected.
They will not want to go through that at the moment, because if they do that, it will also, by taking them to court, by taking the broadcasters, Sky, especially Sky and BT, that would mean that they will also be jeopardizing next season. Another 3 billion is awaiting from the 1st of August.
But what is wrong in making refunds?
The Premier League don't want to make refunds.
Yeah, but then that's their problem. Because first of all, let's not act like the Premier League cannot afford to make refunds. That's first of all. Secondly, these are unusual situations and circumstances. And at the end of the day, everybody is losing out here. We already said that people are going to lose more from the economic effects of COVID-19 than they are from COVID-19 itself. The Premier League is not unique to that situation, and they have to understand that. People are losing money everywhere. The Premier League are not unique. So if they're in that situation where they cannot do anything, they cannot step out of the box in any way, their only option, like Doctor said, is to actually go to court and still try and see what they can do. Quite frankly, they actually just have to bow their heads and say, you know what, we're not the only ones that are going to have to do this. That's honestly it.
No, I understand your point, but they are already hemorrhaging cash, and they are looking for a way to actually mitigate against that. And sponsorship money is one certain money that they always bank on that is actually shared across the board. So having to also lose that.
At this time, all of us are having to give up something.
Thank you.
The World Bank says the COVID-19 is going to cause a lot of economic pain.
Exactly.
And I do not think that anybody, individual or organization, can be insulated from this collective pain that we all share. That reminds us, tragically, of the common humanity that we also share.
But we do miss the Premier League.
Yeah, we certainly do miss the Premier League. All right, before I quickly go, Anthony Joshua also...
We don't have any more time for more stories, Aaron. I'm so sorry.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure to
come back on the beach.
Thank you very much.